At 3:07 in the morning, Caleb Monroe came downstairs for a glass of water for his daughter and stopped dead in the doorway of his own kitchen. A pregnant white woman was on her knees, scrubbing his marble floor like she was trying to erase herself from it. The house was quiet enough for him to hear the wet drag of the gray rag, the small shake in her breathing, the bucket water slapping against metal. Above her, gold pendant lights burned soft and expensive. Beside her trembling hands, Caleb's work boots looked too heavy, too close, too much like a man standing over someone who could not stand back up. One wrong move could cost him the custody review he had in 11 days, the restoration contract keeping his mortgage alive, and the reputation he had spent years protecting as a black father in a neighborhood that still treated his presence like a mistake. Then something tiny tapped against the bucket, a brass whistle, tied to her wrist with a faded red string. Caleb forgot how to breathe. Her phone buzzed on the floor, and a man's voice snapped through the speaker. "Do not speak to the homeowner. Especially not him." Caleb whispered one name he had not said since childhood. Grace. The woman's head lifted slowly, sweat shining at her hairline, fear moving across her face before recognition could. "Please," she said, her voice barely above the water. "Don't say my name here. What would you do if someone from your past appeared in your home like this, afraid and begging you not to recognize her? Drop where you're watching from, and subscribe if you believe some choices show who a person really is." Caleb did not step closer right away. That was the first thing that made Grace look at him differently. He did not grab her arm. He did not bar questions. He did not reach for his phone to record proof that he was innocent. He only looked at the rag in her hand, the swelling of her stomach pressed against the bucket, and the white chemical burn starting to bloom across two of her knuckles. Upstairs, a floorboard creaked. Nora, his 8-year-old daughter, had been fighting a cough all night, and 10 minutes ago, she had stood in his bedroom doorway holding her empty cup with both hands. "Daddy, can I have water?" she had asked, trusting the world because he was still in it. Caleb had promised he would be right back. Promises mattered in his house. They were all he had left after his wife died, after the condolence casserole stopped coming, after every form in the family court office asked him to prove that love was not enough unless it came with stable income, clean walls, safe routines, and no trouble. And now trouble was kneeling on his kitchen floor wearing a faded cleaning dress, 7 months pregnant, with a childhood whistle tied to her wrist like a warning from another life. Grace dropped her eyes before he could ask the obvious question. Her shoulders tightened, trained by fear, but there was still something in the way she held her spine, something educated and careful, like a woman who had once spoken in rooms where people listened. "I'll finish before morning," she said. "Just tell them I didn't stop." Caleb looked past her at the open cabinet under the sink. A bottle with no label sat behind the pipes. He knew that smell. Years of restoring old houses had taught him the difference between cleaner and poison. He moved then, slow enough for her to see every motion, and crouched until his eyes were level with hers. Not above her. Level. "No pregnant woman is scrubbing my floor with poison in her hands," he said quietly. "Not in my house." Grace's fingers closed around the brass whistle. For 1 second, the kitchen went still. Then the security light outside the glass door blinked red, and Caleb realized someone was watching. The red security light blinked once beyond the glass, then went dark again, but Caleb Monroe kept seeing it even after he helped Grace sit at the kitchen table. The gray rag lay in a freezer bag on the counter, sealed between 2 paper towels like something dangerous. The brass whistle stayed on Grace's wrist, half hidden under her sleeve, but Nora had already noticed it from the stairs. She stood barefoot in her oversized sleep shirt, holding her empty cup, looking from the bucket to the pregnant woman to her father's face. "Daddy," she whispered, "why was she on the floor?" Caleb did not answer too quickly. He had learned that children heard the truth better when adults did not decorate it. "Because somebody forgot she was a person," he said. Nora looked at Grace then, not with fear, but with the careful sadness of a child who had already seen her father come home, tired too many times. That was the part Caleb tried hardest to hide. By daylight, he was not the man in the doorway of a renovated kitchen with marble under his boots. He was a widower who woke before the alarm, packed Nora's lunch with the last 2 slices of turkey, and wrote the date on every bill taped to the refrigerator because family court liked paperwork more than promises. He owned Monroe Restoration, but owned was a generous word. The old blue pickup outside still had one headlight brighter than the other. His toolboxes were cleaner than his dress shoes. The mortgage on the house was current by $12 and 3 days of borrowed time. He had restored the place himself, room by room. After buying it cheap from an estate sale nobody else wanted to touch, sanding old stair rails until his knuckles split, saving broken tile instead of replacing it, teaching Nora that you did not throw something away just because other people could not see what it might become. In 11 days, a custody evaluator would walk through that same house with a clipboard and decide whether Caleb's quiet was stability or isolation, whether his long work hours were sacrifice or neglect, whether a black father raising a little girl alone in a polished neighborhood was responsible or suspicious. Caleb never said that part out loud. He only ironed Nora's school uniform at night, kept fruit in the bowl even when he skipped dinner, and answered every teacher email before midnight. On the kitchen table, Grace's hands curled around the cup of water he had placed in front of her. She had not drunk yet. Her eyes kept moving to the doors, the windows, the phone on the floor. Caleb saw the habit in it. A person who had learned that help often came with witnesses. Nora stepped closer and pointed gently to the whistle. Is that for emergencies? Grace's mouth trembled, almost a smile, almost pain. It used to be, she said. Caleb felt the old memory press against his ribs, but before it could open, Grace's phone rang again. This time the screen showed the name Horizon Domestic Services. Caleb did not touch it. Grace did. Her face changed before the voice even finished the first sentence. Then she held the phone out with shaking fingers, and Caleb heard a man say, calm as polished glass, "Mr. Monroe, if you interfere with our employee again, the footage goes to your custody reviewer before sunrise." The man on the phone did not raise his voice. That was what made it colder. He told Caleb Monroe to bring Grace to the front security office of the gated community within 10 minutes, or Horizon Domestic Services would submit the kitchen footage as evidence of unsafe conduct around a minor. Caleb looked up the stairs where Nora stood frozen in her sleep shirt, then at Grace, whose hand had tightened around the brass whistle until the red string cut into her skin. He had a child to protect. He had a woman in danger sitting at his table. And now the world outside his kitchen was asking him to choose which one deserved his courage. By 3:26, the 3 of them were standing inside the private security office at the entrance of Briar Hall Estates. The room smelled like leather, coffee, and expensive silence. A wall of camera screens glowed above a marble counter. Caleb's old work jacket, cracked phone, and paint-scarred boots looked wrong against the black chairs and brushed steel nameplates. Nora stood close to his leg, holding the sleeve of his jacket with 2 fingers. Grace sat across from him with her knees together, shoulders straight, eyes lowered, trying to make herself small and failing because everything about her still carried the shape of a woman who had once been listened to. A guard looked Caleb up and down before checking the homeowner list twice. "You live in number 18?" he asked. Caleb met his eyes. "I pay the mortgage on number 18. The guard's jaw moved, but no apology came. Then the glass door opened, and Victor Hale walked in wearing a charcoal overcoat, polished shoes, and the calm expression of a man who had already decided how the story would be told. He did not look at Grace first. He looked at Caleb. "Mr. Monroe, our employee was assigned to complete a contracted restoration safe floor treatment. You interfered, removed cleaning materials, and brought a minor into a labor dispute." Nora's fingers tightened on Caleb's sleeve. Caleb said nothing. His eyes went to the tablet Victor placed on the counter. The footage had no sound. On the screen, Grace was on her knees. Caleb stood above her. The angle made his stillness look like threat, his caution look like control. The same kitchen moment, stripped of every quiet thing that had made a human. Victor tapped the screen. That is what a custody reviewer will see. Grace flinched, but when Caleb glanced at her, she shook her head almost imperceptibly. "Don't fight him. Not here." Victor noticed the movement. His gaze dropped to the brass whistle on her wrist. Something passed over his face too quickly for most people to catch. Caleb caught it. Victor smiled. Grace, that little object again? We discussed props. Nora looked up. It's not a prop, she said softly. It's for emergencies. The room went still for half a breath. Grace's eyes lifted to Nora, and for the first time since the kitchen, her guarded face cracked. Victor reached toward the whistle. Caleb stepped between them. Not fast, not loud, just enough. You don't touch her. Victor's smile thinned. On the tablet, the footage froze as his thumb hit pause. Caleb looked down, and in the corner of the screen, behind the bucket, he saw something no one else had noticed. The unlabeled bottle under his sink had a Horizon barcode on its torn edge. Caleb did not point at the barcode right away. He let the tablet sit under Victor Hale's hand and watched the frozen image the way he studied a damaged floor before making the first cut. In the corner of the screen, behind the gray bucket, the unlabeled bottle leaned against the cabinet base. Most people would have seen trash, cleaner, nothing. Caleb saw a torn Horizon barcode, a missing hazard label, and a chemical sheen on the marble that did not belong in any restoration-safe treatment. Zoom in, he said. The guard looked at Victor first. That small glance told Caleb more than the footage did. Victor gave a tired smile. Mr. Monroe, this is not a courtroom. Caleb kept his voice low. No, it's a security office. So secure the truth. Nora's hand slipped into his, warm and nervous. Grace looked up at him then, just for a second, and her eyes changed in a way she tried to hide. Not trust. Not yet. Recognition of a man who had noticed the one thing everyone else wanted to pass over. The guard hesitated, then pinched the screen wider. The image sharpened. The barcode was there, half torn but readable. Caleb reached into the pocket of his work jacket and pulled out his phone, the cracked one with tape across the case. He opened the photo he had taken before leaving the kitchen. The same bottle, the same torn barcode, the same cloudy streak where the liquid had touched his floor. He turned the screen toward the guard. Not Victor. That bottle was in my house before she sat at my table, he said, and whatever was inside it burned her hand. Grace pulled her sleeve over her knuckles as if shame could cover pain, but her voice escaped before she could stop it. That product requires gloves and ventilation. The words came too precise, too practiced for a frightened night cleaner. Victor's head turned. Grace went still. Caleb saw her cleaning bag under the chair then, half open, a folded paper tucked beside a pair of cheap latex gloves. Only 3 words showed on the crease. Complaint intake form. Victor saw Caleb see it. His smile thinned. Or she mishandled standard product, Victor said quickly. Or you staged that photo after interfering with our employee. Either way, you're not authorized to collect company materials. Caleb's jaw tightened, but he did not bite. He looked at Grace's wrist instead. The brass whistle had slid loose, its red string damp from bucket water, the tiny dent along one side catching the blue glow of the security screens. He remembered the dent. A playground fence. Adare. A little girl who had refused to cry until everyone else went home. Grace saw where he was looking and closed her hand around it. Don't, she whispered. Victor's eyes sharpened. Don't what, Grace? The room shrank around the question. Caleb understood, then, that the whistle frightened Victor more than the bottle did. Not because it was evidence anyone could log, but because it belonged to a history Victor had not written. Nora looked from the whistle to Grace's covered hand. If it hurts, she said softly, you're supposed to blow it. Grace's lips parted, but no sound came out. For one thin second, even Victor seemed unsure which face to wear. Then the guard cleared his throat and said the barcode could be checked against the supply manifest. Grace breathed in, almost relief. Caleb felt Nora's fingers loosen. But Victor was already typing on his phone, and before the guard could open the file, the tablet screen went black. A new message appeared across it. Access revoked by admin. For half a second, the security office went so quiet Caleb could hear the fluorescent light humming above the camera wall. The guard's hand froze over the dead tablet. Grace's shoulders lifted with one small breath, the kind a drowning person takes right before the wave comes back. The barcode had been there. The bottle had been there. The truth had almost had a doorway. Then Victor Hale slipped his phone into his coat pocket, smooth as a man closing a drawer. "Technical permissions," he said. "Happens all the time." Caleb looked at the black screen, then at Victor's face. He did not need the file to know who had locked it, but knowing a thing and proving it were two different kinds of weight. Nora pressed closer to his side. Grace's fingers tightened around the brass whistle until the little dent disappeared beneath her thumb. The guard shifted uneasily. "Mr. Hale, if there's a supply manifest, we can request a copy through proper channels." Victor's smile stayed polite. "Of course. Tomorrow morning." Tomorrow morning. Caleb glanced at the clock. 3:41. Grace had chemical burns on her hand now. Nora had school in 4 hours. His custody review was 11 days away, but suddenly it felt as if someone had already walked through his house with a red pen. Then Caleb's cracked phone vibrated. An automated alert from the Family Services portal glowed on the screen. Urgent note added to pending custody file. Beneath the alert was a third-party safety notice from Horizon Domestic Services, marked child present during employee distress. The footer showed it had been drafted at 3:19 before Caleb ever walked into this office. His stomach went cold, but his face did not change. Victor noticed anyway. Men like Victor lived off the tiny movements people try to hide. "You see, Mr. Monroe," he said softly, "this is why we keep labor issues away from children." Grace turned her head. For the first time, anger flashed through the fear on her face. Not loud, not free, just a spark trapped under glass. "Leave his daughter out of this," she said. Victor did not even look at her. "You brought this into his home." The sentence landed hard because it sounded reasonable to anyone who had not seen her on that floor. Caleb wanted to take Nora home. He wanted to shut the door, make tea, sit outside her room until she slept, and let the ugly machine pass his house by. That would be safe. That would be fatherly, some people would say. But across the room, Grace was still holding a cup of water she had not trusted enough to drink, and beneath her chair, the folded complaint form in her cleaning bag looked smaller than the system built to bury it. The guard reached for the freezer bag Caleb had brought from the kitchen, the one with the gray rag sealed inside. "We'll need to hold this as disputed property." Caleb placed his palm flat on the counter before the guard could take it. Not hard, not threatening, just there. "That rag touched my floor, her skin, and whatever was in that bottle," he said. "It stays sealed until someone outside Horizon sees it." Victor's eyes narrowed. Careful. Refusing to surrender company evidence can be interpreted as obstruction. Nora looked up at her father. "Daddy, are they saying you did something wrong because you helped her?" Caleb looked down, and the whole room seemed to wait for the answer. "Sometimes," he said, "people call it wrong when they need the truth to stay small." Grace closed her eyes like the words had hurt more than the chemicals. The whistle slid from her wrist and tapped once against the chair leg. Victor bent and picked it up before anyone else could move. "And this," he said, holding it between two fingers, "will be documented as an unauthorized item used in a staged incident." Grace stood too quickly, one hand flying to her stomach. Caleb stepped toward her, then stopped himself so no camera could turn care into force. Victor saw that too. He laid a thin envelope on the marble counter. "Sign the statement, Mr. Monroe. Say she became unstable. Say you overreacted, and take your daughter home before this follows her into daylight." The envelope lay on the marble counter between Caleb Monroe and the life Victor Hale was offering him back. One signature, one lie, and he could take Nora home before sunrise. The statement was only 3 paragraphs, typed in clean legal language. Grace Whitaker became emotionally unstable during a scheduled cleaning assignment. Caleb Monroe intervened without authorization. No hazardous materials were observed. It was neat. It was painless. It erased the bucket, the burn on Grace's hand, the gray rag in the freezer bag, and the pregnant woman who had been on her knees in his kitchen. Victor slid a pen beside it. "You are a father," he said softly. "Act like one." Nora's fingers curled around Caleb's jacket. Grace stood beside the chair, one hand on the table, the other pressed beneath her stomach as if holding herself together from the inside. The brass whistle dangled from Victor's fingers now, small and helpless, its red string wrapped once around his knuckle. Or, Victor continued, we send the edited footage to Family Services, your lender, and the Kensington Hotel Group. That restoration contract of yours is still under review, isn't it? Caleb looked at him then, not surprised, only still. Men like Victor always found a place where fear lived. And Grace? Caleb asked. Victor glanced at her like she was an invoice. Grace will be documented as non-compliant. No shift record, no injury report, no employment verification. A woman in her condition should think very carefully before becoming difficult. Grace's face went pale. For a moment, Caleb saw the trap close around both of them. If he signed, he protected Nora and helped bury Grace. If he refused, he risked his daughter's custody file, his work, his name, and Grace's last official proof that she had been employed when she was hurt. The guard looked away. Even he understood what kind of choice it was. Nora whispered, Daddy, why does the truth need a paper to be quiet? Caleb breathed once through his nose. He thought of the little lunchbox waiting by the stairs, the overdue mortgage notice under the fruit bowl, the evaluator who would soon decide whether his home had too much struggle in it to be called safe. Then he looked at Grace's burned knuckles and the whistle in Victor's hand. Give it back to her, he said. Victor's smile returned. You are in no position to give instructions. Caleb did not move closer. He turned to the guard instead. She's pregnant. She has visible chemical burns. You have a sealed rag, a product barcode on video, and a man asking me to sign that no hazardous materials existed before anyone checks the manifest. If I sign that, I'm not protecting my daughter. I'm teaching her how men with clean shoes bury women with dirty hands. Grace closed her eyes. The pen stayed on the counter. Caleb pushed it back toward Victor with 2 fingers. No, the word was quiet, but it changed the air. Victor's face hardened. He slid the whistle into a clear evidence pouch and wrote stage prop across the label. Then we do this the expensive way. Caleb's phone vibrated again. This time, it was a voicemail from the custody office. At the same moment, the guard's camera console chimed. A backup window opened on the screen, labeled Homeowner Cloud. Original motion file available. The guard frowned. This one has audio. Victor turned too quickly, and Caleb saw fear before the man could hide it. For one breath, the words on the screen looked like mercy. Homeowner Cloud. Original motion file available. The guard opened it before Victor could stop him, and Caleb's kitchen appeared again. Only this time the image had sound. The room heard the rag dragging over marble. They heard Grace's breathing catch. They heard Caleb's voice, low and careful, saying, No pregnant woman is scrubbing my floor with poison in her hands. Not in my house. Nora looked up at him as if the whole room had finally heard the father she already knew. Even the guard's face changed. Grace closed her eyes, and the brass whistle inside the evidence pouch trembled because Victor's fingers had tightened too hard around it. For 5 seconds, Truth stood upright. Then Victor laughed once softly. Thank you, he said. You just confirmed you recorded my employee inside your private residence, collected company property, and brought your minor child into the chain of custody. The guard's face fell. Caleb understood before anyone explained it. The same file that proved he had not threatened Grace could be twisted into something else. A black father with cameras, a pregnant employee in distress, a child awake at 3 in the morning, a sealed rag no officer had logged yet. Victor did not need to erase the truth. He only needed to make it look contaminated. Caleb's phone lit again. The voicemail from the custody office sat unanswered, and beneath it came a message from the Kensington Hotel Group. Contract review paused, pending incident clarification. The words did not shout. They did not have to. They took food from next month's table in silence. Nora read enough of the screen to understand something had been taken. Her lower lip moved, but she did not cry. That hurt Caleb more than tears. Grace reached for the counter. This is my fault, she whispered. Victor turned on her with smooth pity. Finally, something accurate. Caleb looked at the envelope, the pen, the evidence pouch, the dead tablet, the backup screen, and the folded complaint form visible in Grace's cleaning bag. There was still a safe path sitting there. Sign. Go home. Keep Nora untouched by the ugliness. Let Grace become a difficult employee with no injury report and no proof. He could almost feel that future opening, warm and quiet and rotten. Then Nora stepped toward the counter and placed both small hands near the pouch with a whistle. "That belongs to her," she said. Victor's smile disappeared. Caleb raised one hand before the guard could react. "Nora, step back." His voice was gentle, and she obeyed, but her eyes stayed on the whistle. Caleb opened the Homeowner Cloud file on his cracked phone. His thumb hovered over the share icon. If he sent the original footage out before Victor sent the edited one, he would lose control of it. Nora's voice would be in it. His kitchen would be in it. His choice would be in it. So would every mistake Victor had counted on hiding. Caleb selected the custody portal first, then the emergency intake address printed on Grace's folded complaint form. "Mr. Monroe," Victor warned, "think very carefully." Caleb did. He thought of his daughter, asking why Truth needed a paper to be quiet. Then he sent the file. The upload bar crawled across the screen. 91%. 96. Complete. Caleb turned to the guard. "Open the source details," he said. "Not the video. The file history attached to the motion event." The guard hesitated, then clicked. A narrow log opened beneath the clip. "Remote admin activity. Vail. Supply manifest access 2:58 a.m. Grace saw the name before anyone could hide it, and the brass whistle slipped from Victor's hand, still sealed in plastic, striking the marble like a tiny alarm. The whistle hit the marble, and the sound was small, but every person in the security office turned toward it. On the screen above them, the log remained open beneath Caleb's original kitchen file. "Remote admin activity. Vail. Supply manifest access 2:58 a.m. Victor moved first, too smooth and too late. "That is internal maintenance," he said. "It has nothing to do with this incident." Caleb did not look at him. He looked at the guard. "Open the manifest history for product HZ41. The guard hesitated, caught between the man with the contract and a man with a mortgage. Then Nora whispered, "Please." That one word did what Caleb's anger never would have. The guard clicked. A list unfolded across the wall of screens. Supply kit assigned to Grace Whitaker, Briar Hall number 18, scheduled 2:55 a.m. Product code HZ41. Under hazard status, the first entry read, "Restricted ventilation, gloves required, not approved for pregnancy exposure." 3 minutes later, a second entry appeared under the Vail admin account. The warning line had been deleted. The room did not explode. It went quiet in the way rooms go quiet when powerful men run out of language. Grace stared at the screen, one burned hand pressed lightly beneath her stomach, the other reaching toward the sealed pouch on the floor. Victor stepped toward the keyboard. Caleb moved too, not touching him, not crowding him, simply placing his body between Victor and the evidence. "No," Caleb said. "You don't erase this one." Victor's eyes sharpened. "You have no authority here." Caleb lifted his cracked phone. "Maybe not, but the original audio is in my Homeowner Cloud. The same file is already in my custody portal, and I sent a copy to the emergency intake address on Grace's complaint form. This office just opened your admin log on its own system. That gives 3 timestamps before anyone can call it a misunderstanding." He turned slightly, so the guard, Grace, Nora, and the camera above the counter could hear every word. "At 2:58, you changed a chemical record. At 3:07, she was on my floor with burns on her hand. At 3:41, you tried to make me sign a statement saying no hazardous materials existed." Victor's polished face cracked. "She is unstable," he snapped, pointing at Grace. "She has been trying to build a retaliation case for months. She uses pregnancy, old stories, anything she can." No, Grace's voice cut through the office, thin at first, then steadier. She bent slowly, picked up the sealed pouch with the brass whistle, and held it against her chest. Her hand shook, but she did not lower it. "That whistle is not a prop. Caleb gave it to me when we were children because I was scared to ask for help." She looked at Victor then, not like an employee, not like a woman on her knees, but like someone remembering the weight of her own name. And tonight you made me kneel on his floor with a chemical you knew I should not touch because I refused to withdraw my complaint. The guard's face changed again. This time there was no way back. Caleb pointed to the gray rag sealed in the freezer bag. Log that. Log her burns. Log the original audio. Log the deleted warning. And log the fact that he called it staged before anyone checked the manifest. For the first time, the image from Caleb's kitchen sat beside the truth that belonged to it. Grace on her knees. Caleb in the doorway. The bucket. The rag. The whistle. What had looked like accusation now looked like evidence. Victor took one step back, and Grace stepped forward. Not far, just enough that she was no longer behind Caleb. I want an outside investigator, she said, and I want my name on the report. Caleb looked at her, and something old and broken shifted quietly toward repair. But Nora was still watching the custody alert on his phone, and the morning had not forgiven any of them yet. By the time the first gray light touched the windows of Briar Hall Estates, the security office no longer looked polished. It looked used. The marble counter held a sealed gray rag, a printed manifest, 2 written statements, and a brass whistle in its clear pouch, no longer labeled stage prop. The guard had crossed those words out himself, slowly, while Victor Hale sat near the wall with his overcoat folded across his lap and nothing left to polish except his silence. An outside investigator had been called. Horizon's emergency compliance line had opened a case before dawn. Grace's burns had been photographed, logged, and treated by a clinic nurse whose face hardened when she read the chemical code. It did not fix everything. It only stopped the lie from moving faster than the truth. Nobody apologized the way stories sometimes make people apologize. Real shame moved quieter than that. It lived in the guard who could not meet Caleb's eyes, in the HOA manager who suddenly remembered Caleb was a homeowner, in the way everyone stopped calling Grace difficult once the report had her name on it. But Caleb did not wait to be crowned a hero. He only asked for copies of every file that mentioned his daughter. His voice stayed even. His hands did not shake until Nora slipped her small fingers into his palm. "Can we go home now, Daddy?" she asked. He looked down at the child who had watched adults try to make truth look dangerous, and his chest ached with the cost of what she had learned before breakfast. "Yes," he said, "but first, we make sure Miss Grace has a ride to the clinic." Grace looked at him then, and the old years between them did not disappear. They simply stopped standing in the way. She did not rush into his arms. She did not turn gratitude into romance. She only took the whistle back after the nurse cleared it, tied the faded red string around her wrist, and said, "You were the first person who ever told me I could make noise when I was scared." Caleb nodded once, because anything more might have broken him. 2 days later, Grace filed her full complaint with the original footage attached, not as a woman begging to be believed, but as a former labor attorney who still knew how systems hid their dirt. Horizon Domestic Services did not collapse overnight, but the altered safety record, the deleted warning, and the staged report opened doors the company had kept locked for years. Grace gave statements for women whose names had never reached a file. She also sent one letter that mattered to Caleb more than the headlines, a sworn statement to the custody evaluator, explaining what Nora had witnessed and what her father had chosen when lying would have been easier. The Kensington Hotel Group restored Caleb's contract after reviewing the audio, but Caleb did not smile until the evaluator closed her folder and said Nora's home was stable, safe, and deeply loved. That evening, back in the same kitchen where Grace had once knelt on the floor, nobody was on their knees. The bucket was gone. The rag was gone. The unlabeled bottle was sealed in an evidence box far from Nora's reach. Grace sat at the table with tea she finally trusted enough to drink. Nora stood on a chair by the back door, tying the brass whistle to a small hook beside the house keys. "For emergencies," she said. Grace touched her stomach and gave a small laugh that sounded almost like breathing again. Caleb watched the whistle swing once in the warm kitchen light. Once, it had been a child's promise. It became a warning. Then evidence. Now it was something quieter and stronger. Proof that in this house, no one had to stay silent on the floor. Have you ever been misunderstood when you were only trying to do the right thing? If you were Caleb, would you have risked your job, your name, in your custody review to protect Grace? Leave the place you're watching from in the comments, and subscribe for more stories about quiet people whose dignity finally gets seen.